Good afternoon, Doctor and my fellow friends. My group will be presenting our answers for Tutorial 5, which is Chapter 7, Utility Maximization. My name is Ng Han Ming, and my other group members, who are Tasmin, Friska, Danli, and Yuan, will also be presenting in that order. The answer for question 1 is the desired outcome was to discourage people from buying cigarette and smoking. The rationale behind graphic warnings with accompanying text on tobacco products is to inform smokers and non-smokers about the documented health risks of smoking and to achieve behavioral changes through the shock value of lost frame graphical images. Seen through the lens of economic theory, the shock value of the images and the additional health information are intended to lower the marginal utility of consumption and to act as an implicit increase in the price of current and future cigarettes through the provision of more information about the healthcare costs of tobacco consumption. Both the rational addiction model and behavioral models of irrational addiction predict that lower marginal utilities of consumption and future price increases will lead to some smokers to quit smoking altogether and other smokers to decrease their current cigarette consumption. Thus, it was expected that smoking rates would decline immediately and permanently. In reality, cigarette warning labels proved to be effective in alarming people before the buying of cigarettes. However, smokers are least affected by warning labels. Warning labels based on fear appeal theory does not make smokers consume less cigarette, as most smokers tend to understand the fact that they are at risk. Besides that, the price elasticity of demand for cigarettes is less than 1 or inelastic, which means that consumers are not really sensitive towards price changes. Thus, the demand for cigarette only falls.
I am Tasmin. I will continue discuss question 2. The question asks about what is the combination of the three products should purchase in order to maximize utility. We can use the formula marginal utility divided by price. Refer to the table. The utility maximizing combination of good attainable by the consumer is 2 ice cream, 6 isotonic drinks, and 4 cakes. By summing up marginal utility information, the consumer is obtaining 34 utilities of satisfaction from 2 ice cream, 189 utilities of satisfaction from the 6 isotonic drinks, and 39 utility of satisfaction from 4 cakes. So at the end, the 26 ringgit will spend optimally and it will get 262 utility of satisfaction.
Question 3. A consumer has an income of 24 ringgit to spend each day. The only two goods the consumer is interested in purchasing are goods A and goods B. The marginal utility schedules for these two goods are shown in the table below. The price of B does not change and is 2 ringgit. The marginal utility per dollar from B is also shown in the table. However, the price of A varies as shown in the table. The marginal utility per dollar from A when the price of A is 8 ringgit and 4 ringgit is shown in the following table. The question asks us to complete the table below to show how much of A the consumer will buy each week at each of the two possible prices of A. Also, show how much B will be demanded when the price of A changes. My answer is quantity of A demanded is 2 when the price of A is 8 ringgit, while the quantity of B demanded is 4 when the price of B is 2 ringgit. Second, quantity of A demanded is 4 when the price of A changes to 4 ringgit, while the quantity of B demanded is 4 when the price of B is still 2 ringgit. We assume that the consumer's income is 24 ringgit and spend on both goods in condition the combination of good A and good B have the same marginal utility per ringgit. However, the choice have to be made based on the income of the customer, which is 24 ringgit. Therefore, combination 1 and 2 fulfill the conditions of expenditure, and so it is the equilibrium condition. Question 4. Use marginal utility analysis to explain why the growing popularity of tablets over laptops. Popularity of tablets over laptops is related to consumers' decision-making and purchase powers that influenced by a few factors such as consumers' income and taste or trend. If consumers' income increase, demand towards inferior goods will decrease. In this case, laptop has basic or less features compared to tablet that has more features such as smaller screen sizes and less hardware, lighter, and more advantages that leads to taste or trend of consumer. Taste or trend is a want and not a need, and also known as a preference in theory of consumer behavior, which is consumers have some idea how much marginal utility they might get from purchasing or consuming additional unit. And here we are looking at the graph. The total utility graph of tablets are showing upwards because when it comes to want, consumers are willing to spend more money to gain marginal utility or extra satisfaction, such as tablets that become a trend nowadays. Next, marginal utility graph showing downward or decreasing because laptop has no new features that can influence consumers' decision making and known as low diminishing marginal utility.
Hi, I'm Dan Lee. Next, we will talk about question 5. Discuss the decision a drug trafficker must make before deciding whether or not to smuggle a drug. Traffickers compare marginal benefits and marginal costs before smuggling drugs. To smuggle drugs, drug dealers often choose many very covert ways to avoid being searched by the police. So dealers must take into account the cost of transporting drugs and maximize their total utility by comparing it with the proceeds from the drug trade. Thus, before smuggling drugs, traffickers must decide which form of transport will cost the least and which variety of drugs will yield the most. Drug dealers may consider hiring people to carry the drugs, how many people are employed, how many drugs each person carries. The drug dealer may compare the marginal cost of these combinations. Dealers may also consider smuggling drugs disguised as candy or chocolate. Packaging drugs disguised as candy also requires dealers to consider their marginal cost. When drug dealers consider the marginal benefit, they may consider which drug has the highest marginal benefit. When smuggling the same drug, it is the number of drugs transported at a time that brings the greatest benefit. After making these decisions, a drug trafficker may not smuggle drugs if he thinks he cannot maximize his total utility. That's all of my presentation. Thank you.
Question 6 is on 6 January 2019, a Malaysian flight attendant was arrested at Melbourne Airport when Australian Border Force officers found parcels of drugs on her. She was paid about 1,700 Australian dollars for every 1 kilogram she smoked and admitted carrying at least 20 kilograms worth Im 99,004.60 into Australia. Describe a relationship between rising the annual cost of drug trafficking and the frequency of drug trafficking committed. Explain the implications of this relationship as applied to drug-related crimes. My answer to the first question is that as the marginal cost goes up, the frequency of crime goes down because the cost of crime is rising. The marginal benefit is not as great as it used to be, so the frequency will go down. The second answer to my question is that as the marginal cost increases, the frequency of drug trafficking becomes smaller, which has a negative impact on the drug industry chain. The rising cost of drug trafficking has an impact on the entire drug industry. It is if people who transport drugs and are paid more, the price of jacks may rise or demand for jacks may fall. Jack chains may be hit and crime rates may fall. This is only my personal opinion. That's all. Thank you.